What do you expect? Vikings fall 34-31, drop yet another close game. We're here to break it down and all the fallout here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Vikings podcast your first listen of the day. Hashtag first listen. I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And today on the show, we got to recap another close loss. The Vikings go to Baltimore. They play it tough. They go out 34-31, overtime, Justin Tucker field goal, as if it was ever going to come down to anything else. But we have to talk about it. And what I really want to get to by the end of this show is the fallout, because we're sitting here at 3-5. We have a season that feels like it is on the brink of the bottom falling out. And maybe the bottom already has, but it feels like the Vikings could just as easily, I mean, look, they're never the same team week to week. That's part of the problem, but also part of the benefit. When they're bad, they could just be good again next week, and you'd never see it coming. And they could rattle off 4 wins and make a season out of it, or they could rattle off 4 more losses, and we could be talking about interim head coach Andre Patterson by December. And whatever happens there, it seems like unless the Vikings make a fairly improbable turnaround, we're talking about the next iteration of the Vikings. New GM, new coach, new quarterback, new everything. And from there, we have some other conversations that we haven't really had on this show. We haven't really talked about who the next guy would be overall, what I look for. And so let's have a little bit of that conversation. We might talk a little bit more about it some more this week, as well as breaking down the game. But first, let's recap the game in case you missed it. So here's how the game goes. It's the same pattern as every other Vikings game that we have had so far. The Vikings scream out to a 2-score lead. They blow it. They let the other team back into it by halftime. The other team goes into halftime feeling really good about themselves. The Vikings feel, oh no, here we go again. They come out of halftime. This time, Kene Nwangwu scores a kickoff touchdown, which is awesome, right? We finally are getting contribution from our rookies. There was a Cam Bynum interception as well. At the end of the first half, but the Vikings squandered that, then let the Ravens go all the way down, score a touchdown to make it 17-10. Kick return touchdown makes it 24-10, and then the Ravens rattled off 3 utterly embarrassing drives of, I believe, 10, 18, and 12 plays, all of them touchdowns, and they go up 31-24 as the Vikings, in between those 3 drives, the 2 drives they get in between those 3 are both punts. And one of them's a 3-and-out. So the defense is totally gassed. The defense was on the field for 88 plays. They gave up 36 first downs in this game. And yeah, the Vikings went through the formality of going down and scoring with a minute left to go to tie the game up. And the defense went through the formality of stopping them with a minute to go, stopping the Ravens with a minute to go, bringing it into overtime. The Ravens win the toss in overtime. Anthony Barr makes an incredible play for an interception, one of those big explosive plays we've kind of been wanting to see from him. We get that. The Vikings go 1 yard forward. They get a yard. They netted 0 yards because on the last turnover they lost a yard. So they lost a yard off a turnover and then they gained a yard off a turnover. That's the production they got off of turnovers. And you can tell that is, you can tell like in the sound of my voice how much that bothers me. In overtime, they get an interception. That should be ball game. That should destroy them. You need 2 first downs. You go kick a field goal. You win the game. Instead, they go 3-and-out, gaining 1 yard, and the Ravens go and score the game-winning field goal from there. At a point where the defense is gassed. And we could spend a lot of time doling out blame, and there's some stuff that I'm just struggling to kind of make sense of that I kind of want to defer until I've seen the tape and I understand it a little bit better. I thought Kirk Cousins was fine. I thought he was okay. I think last week, I came away thinking, man, Kirk Cousins and the play calling were really bad. And I looked at the tape and I ended up coming off of the play calling a little bit and going harder on Kirk Cousins. This time, I don't really know what to make of it, but it seems like it was much more the play calling than Kirk. I'll watch the tape, maybe come away with a different opinion, maybe come away with the same opinion, but stronger, who knows. But ultimately, The defense struggled a lot. And there's a lot of talk right now about, well, the offense got all these 3-and-outs and these punts. Of course, the defense had no rest. They had to go right back out there. The offense didn't let an 18-play drive up. They weren't gassed when that drive started. That was like the second drive of the third quarter. You're not gassed by that time. The Ravens had a 10-play drive, and then the Vikings had a 7-play drive, and then the Ravens had an 18-play drive, and then the Vikings went 3-and-out. Now, going 3-and-out there was bad. So you had 18, 3-and-out, and then the Vikings had to go right back out there, and they went, gave up another touchdown drive. But that 18-play drive was embarrassing. They couldn't get off the field. They couldn't stop anything. I believe there were a couple of fourth downs in there. It was really, really an embarrassing drive where the Ravens just sort of punched the Vikings in the mouth, and they never really recovered on defense. And that, I think that's the moment right there that defines the game. 18 plays, 3-and-out. And you're going to see a bunch of time of possession stats and a bunch of play stats and stuff. But to me, the game exists right there in that microcosm. So that's the blow by blow. But I think there are some things that keep rearing their ugly heads that we kind of have to talk about. There's these matters of discipline, these kind of recurring issues of penalties, of not taking advantage of turnovers, of giving up points in the 2-minute drill and stuff, all this stuff that kind of keeps happening. One of the things that was my favorite part of the Zimmer era was they wouldn't very often make the same mistake twice. Unless you think that, running the ball is a mistake, but they would disagree with you. So it's not like they're making a mistake and not learning their lesson. They just would disagree with you that it's a mistake. And, there's discussion to be had there. But when it comes to stuff like, the fumbling problems earlier in the season, they're going to do a fumble drill. They're going to get that fixed. Right. And that always felt like the Zimmer teams would fix what ailed them. And that's not the case anymore. And I think it's been a minute since that's been the case, and that's really disappointing. They just keep dissolving in the exact same way, and that's really, really frustrating. I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, and then, of course, I want to talk about kind of what's coming next here. It feels super hollow to be like, on to the Chargers. They're still technically a game out of playoff position because they have so many existential problems as a franchise right now, both on the micro and macro levels, that it feels super dumb to be like, well, what if they won 5 more games on accident and made it into the playoffs as the 7th seed? And yeah, chip in a chair. That's what I always say. And if that happens, I'll hold to that. Chip in a chair. You know what? 2 seed, you got to watch out because we're a weird team. But it feels so hollow to talk about that right now. So let's take a little bit of stock and talk a little bit more about what we have in the Vikings, what we want to keep about the Vikings, and what is leading to this extremely frustrating Sisyphean nightmare. So stick around and maybe we can... So... Is that a good enough sell for you? Go stick around and listen to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we all experience the same recurring Groundhog Day style nightmare over and over and over again. But if you want to watch Groundhog Day or any other of your favorite movies on demand or live, you can watch it at DirecTV Stream. DirecTV Stream is a place where you can get all of your devices and apps and logins and stuff all in one place. You're not logging into a million things. You're not trying to juggle a bunch of apps or a bunch of remotes and stuff. It consolidates things in the way we wanted to consolidate TV ever since you kind of got the idea of on-demand and live and all this confusion. Do away with all that. Go check out directtv.stream. You can learn more about DirecTV Stream at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. So we're going to have a lot of time over the week to get into some standout performers, but let me give you something to chew on. Some players that I thought did really positively that maybe we can hang our hats on. The first one that comes to my mind is Kenny Willekes. He got his first sack of his career. He got a lot more snaps than I thought he would get, and he played really, really well. I also thought DJ Wanham had a pretty good game. Those guys rotating were pretty disruptive. The defensive line was disruptive on the whole. Sheldon Richardson, Armin Watts both had pretty good games as well. In this game, I should probably mention Harrison Smith did not play due to COVID-19 because he is unvaccinated. He will miss the Chargers game as well. I harped a lot on the unvaccinated players in the summer. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but suffice it to say that's really disappointing. And Harrison Smith hurt the Vikings by not being vaccinated. And that's a choice that he gets to make, but it's a choice he now has to live with the consequences of. And that really sucks. I wish things weren't that way. There's also Bashad Breland, who left the game with a groin injury. He also looks like he got cleated. And that was pretty gruesome. So you had a lot of Chris Boyd, a lot of Cameron Dantzler. That led to a lot of problems. But Cameron Bynum, in relief of Harrison Smith, had a pretty good game. He had his first interception, which was a fantastic play, diving interception. And there were some smarts to that play as well. Stay tuned later in the week. I'm going to want to break that one down. So there's a few performers there. But what I really want to talk more about is the overall trends here, because the same things keep happening. And the first one I guess I want to start with is the 2-minute. I'm going to talk about the 2-minute. I'm going to talk about the turnover woes. I'm going to talk about the Vikings struggling to get to the line of scrimmage and huddle. These are all things that you should be able to rely on. And if you can't, it makes it so much harder to win games. The 2-minute warning. So inside the 2-minute, especially a 2-minute of the first half, the Vikings have given up 45 points, and they've had a number of offensive disasters in their own right. If you remember the Cincinnati game, they got a bunch of penalties. They went backwards. They had the Lions game where they had the ball with 37 seconds and 2 timeouts, or 47 seconds and 2 timeouts, or something like that. They end up kneeling it out, and then the ball comes down. The game comes down to 47 seconds, 2 timeouts, the exact same situation where they needed to go get a field goal, and it's like you could have tried this in the 2-minute of the first half and not even been in the situation. There's, I think a number of times they've gotten the ball with a reasonable scoring opportunity, and they've either declined that scoring opportunity in a controversial fashion, or they try to go forward and they go backward. And all of that is, it compounds when the defense is giving up a lot too. So you get the ball with 1:30 and a couple timeouts, and maybe you can go do something. You go 3 and out immediately and give a touchdown back the other way. And it's like the game flips so much like that. And there is an emotional component to that as well. You go into the locker room up 17-10 when you've been kind of kicking their butt up and down the field for the entire first half. And that's what happened in this Ravens game. Then you feel a little bit like, oh no, here we go again. We're blowing yet another lead. So you might wonder, well, what is it about 2-minute, right? Well, the defensive stuff changes. And situations change things. For one, in 2-minute, outside of times where you're specifically trying to run clock and you're already in field goal range, that kind of thing, it's really all passing downs. And a lot of times it's only deep passing downs. Defenses are more than content to give you 6 yards of play when you only have time to run 7 plays. And you get a little bit down the field, and defenses will take that. So that is going to change the dynamics of things. And some teams are better at that than others. The worst defense in the league might be pretty good when they're playing more off soft coverage, right? What's the problem we've had with Cameron Dantzler and Bashad Breland? Well, they play too far off. But in context where that's good, maybe that'll help. The problem is the Vikings seem to kind of fall apart. It's not just their style of play not being conducive to the 2-minute on defense. It's they make more mistakes in 2-minute. They just crumble under the pressure. And some of that is a young team or a team that's not played together. But, that's Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks and McKenzie. These are veterans, right? If Cameron Dantzler is doing it, that's one thing. He's a second-year player. Maybe the moment's too big for him. But when it's Harrison Smith not communicating right with Eric Kendricks, and then it gets more frustrating. And then you kind of go, okay, why don't these guys have their ducks in a row? And then the game starts going too fast for you, and you're out of rhythm, and you start making more mistakes, and you just don't feel it right. That starts to cause all these problems. There's also the turnover woes. Now, this isn't the Vikings causing or committing turnovers. They have been very good at avoiding turnovers, except the odd fumble. But I think Kirk Cousins only has 2 picks, and one of them was on a Hail Mary. That's not that bad. I think one of them was tipped too. He's been pretty good at taking care of the ball. But when they get the ball on a turnover, and here's the deal, and I had this thought, and I think I tweeted it, and then so people know that I didn't just steal this from Ben Lieber, but I heard Ben Lieber said about the same thing, which makes me feel good. It's like, okay, a real NFL player's having this thought too. I'm not just making stuff up in my head. But I think they have a problem with focus on the sideline. The offense does, because when you are on offense and the defense is on the field, you're maybe looking at the tablet or you're making an adjustment or something, but by and large you're waiting for your next turn, right? And that can come in 3 minutes or 30 seconds. And so you're just kind of waiting to go back on. And so when the punt team comes out and you're like, okay, this is going to be we're going to be up next. You have a second to catch your breath or to, kind of recenter yourself, get your stuff together. But on a turnover, you just have to like zoom right out there. The play clock just starts and you have to get out there and run a play. And in those situations, the Vikings, they won't get out of the huddle. They have to take a timeout. They're going to get a delay a game, and then they get a holding penalty. And then it's like 2nd and 25. And you're like, what happened here? We just got an interception. We were feeling great. And now we're going to punt it back to them in like 30 yards less field position. And that's all that interception was worth. And to me, that's a focus issue. That's not being focused on the sideline. And then when you have to get into focus very quickly, mistakes happen. And that's infuriating and inexcusable. Like, there is nothing to say that makes that okay for a veteran-led team. Kirk Cousins been in the league for 10 years. These kinds of mistakes shouldn't happen. Brian O'Neill, year 4, these kinds of mistakes should not happen. Garrett Bradbury, year 3, and he didn't play in this game. But Mason Cole has been in the league for longer than Garrett Bradbury. Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen. These guys shouldn't be having these problems. They're not rookies. And like, look, a guy with diagnosed ADHD is criticizing your focus. Do you realize how bad that has to get before I'm like, hey guys, you're a little distracted, it seems. And then there are the huddling problems. These drive me insane. These guys have been doing huddles since Pee Wee. It should not be that hard. I don't care if it's loud. It gets loud in the NFL. To get into a huddle, relay a play call and have everybody more or less on the same page. A few miscommunications is understandable. As many as they have pre-snap is not. This has been a problem since the beginning of 2020 for the Vikings. This has been plaguing them. These pre-snap, these organizational problems, these focus issues, this sort of distracted, this inability to overcome the flow of the game and to make the game your own is the personality of the Vikings. And that is the personality of a loser. So I want the Vikings to stop being losers. I hope they can stop being losers. But what if they don't stop being losers? Then we got to talk about it. So let's talk about where we go from here and kind of how we have to approach the rest of the season. Because it feels, again, weird to be like, well, they're playoff position if they win. And if they have these 10 teams lose, like that's probably not relevant. So we have to kind of meet the Vikings where they are, at least on this show, in terms of covering them. So I'll talk about all of that and kind of the higher level of all of this. But first, let me tell you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you're missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it does not taste like one. It's not chalky. It's not rubbery. It doesn't taste like, creatine powder and a little bit of Nesquik. It is delicious. You got to try one for yourself. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're soft, and when you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. You can tell they put a lot of effort into the flavor profile and like how it tastes. You would swear you were eating like an Almond Joy or something. It comes in so many delicious flavors: coconut, raspberry, coconut almond, salted caramel, and it's low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, and chock full of that good protein. So all of the healthy benefits without having to blow a cheat day. And this month, Built is coming out with new limited time flavors every 3 or 4 days. So go back, check their website often. You don't want to miss out. Those are the really, really good ones, the limited time ones. So head to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, whatever you buy, get 15% off of your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. I also want to talk to you about Grambling. BetOnline has redesigned their website and it rocks. You can always bet, the spreads or the over-under, the classic, sportsbook stuff. But I love their live betting. They update it every couple of plays or so. And you can basically just sit there and like ride out the vibe of a game. When the Vikings were up 24-10 and we all knew, everybody and their mother knew they were going to blow this, the Vikings were favored. You could have shorted that, made a little bit of money. So find the time where their odds are going to like bottom out, but you still know they're going to come back, and maybe you can get a better money line or a better point spread or something than if you just bet it on a Tuesday or whatever. You can get basketball, baseball, hockey, pro and college football, of course. And if you enter promo code Locked On when you sign up, you get a 50% welcome bonus. Sign up for free, do your first deposit, and if you enter promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, you get 50% of that matched into your account, deposited as free play money. It's free Grambling money. So BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Look, it's getting nuclear. we can all smell it. We can feel the winds of change on our face. It's getting bad out there. And as the Vikings are 3-5. 7th seed is 4-4. The Vikings rattle off 2 wins in a row. Let's say they beat the Chargers. They beat, a weird Green Bay game. They are 5-4 and 5-5, and we feel a lot better about it, right? If they claw their way back to 500 and they're back in playoff position, we're going, hey, maybe let's get hot at the right time, right? It's possible. It doesn't feel very probable. And so we got to take stock. But a few principles that I have about a rebuild. And I've said this before, but I want to reiterate, build with a purpose. I don't want to be a team like the Browns of a bunch of years ago, where you just sort of tear everything down and accumulate assets, but you're not really building toward anything. And what happened to the Browns was like Sashi and Hugh Jackson and the guys that kind of did all the work to accumulate those draft picks, they all lost their jobs. And then somebody with a different idea came in, and that was Freddie Kitchens and John Dorsey. And then they built something up, and then those guys lost it. Now it's Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. And I think what Berry and Stefanski could have built in Cleveland would have been better if those guys were able to kind of take it, the reins from the start and build with a purpose. But they already had this half-built contraption. They already, Stefanski inherited Baker Mayfield and the Landry-Odell Beckham thing. So those guys sort of inherited something, and they've done well, and they've coached and stuff. But you can tell that ship isn't working as well as it was supposed to. They're supposed to be reaping the rewards of this multiple first overall picks kind of tank, and it's not happening. And I think a lot of that is because too many plans got enacted at once. So build with a purpose. I don't want to go through a lame duck period. I don't want to just bring in some Dan Campbell and say, hey, you're going to suck for 2 years, and then we're actually going to bring the guy. No, I don't want any of that. I don't want to tank for a draft pick or any of that crap either. They'll get the pick they get, and if you want to pick higher, then pay to pick higher. Go trade up. There's nothing wrong with that. Or at least I should say there's no shame in that, especially when it comes to a quarterback. But do something with a purpose, right? Get a coach who you believe in. I don't care if it's a defensive coach. I don't care if it's an offensive coach. I don't care if it's a special teams coach. You're not going to find me on this podcast just harping about let's just get the best offensive coordinator. And you're going to hear that a lot. But that's not what you're going to get with me. We're going to think a little harder here. But I think it's time to start to get excited about what could be. We've been in this for 8 years. We've been in this Mike Zimmer kind of pragmatic and responsible way to go about things. The Rick Spielman, the accumulating lots of draft picks and maneuvering the trade board really well, but then did the picks work out? We've been in this for a long time, and it's starting to get excited. What else could we be? In 2 years, we could be an option team with some really exciting, Josh Allen-esque quarterback. We could have some kid who watched Lamar Jackson throughout all of high school, who's coming up through the ranks, in 2 years and declares as a junior. We could be that, right? That's exciting. Let's get excited about that. But whatever it is, do it with a purpose. I don't want to just meander about in futility and draft top 10 every year, but not really know where the thing is headed. And so that means pick your spot at quarterback. That's my next thing. Pick your spot. That means don't just take the first guy that comes along. I think the Vikings made that mistake with Kirk Cousins. They had a need at quarterback, right? They didn't want to keep any of their 3 guys because they were afraid of knees, and the other one was Case Keenum. And so they took the first guy available. That was Kirk Cousins, the first real option available. They did not want to engage in a 2018 draft that ended up having like several franchise quarterbacks in it. One of them who was available on the board when they drafted. And that was Lamar Jackson, who they just lost to. Now, we could go back in hindsight and say, well, they wanted this, and here's why they did this, and they felt like he was this sure thing, and that's all well and good. But it did feel at the time, if you listen to their quotes, there was this sense of urgency. Guys like this don't come along in free agency every day. It was the line that the Vikings kind of gave about Kirk Cousins. And agree with the decision or not, that's a really bad reason to do it. You should do it because you think he's the key to your franchise, right? Not because, well, this is a weird opportunity. You don't usually get quarterbacks this good here. It's like, but is he good at all? and that question went mysteriously less answered. And so I want to pick your spot. And if that means limping through a year without a quarterback, so be it. Don't draft a Daniel Jones and then pull yourself out of the market for somebody else down the line, for Justin Herbert down the line. Don't be the Giants in that way. And so I look at the Bills. I love the way the Bills, and I know they just lost to Jacksonville, but I love the way the Bills built what they built. They aggressively traded up in a year after they made the wild card round of the playoffs. They, with a purpose, got their quarterback, nurtured that quarterback, built around that quarterback, and built something that is very coherent and very focused. They drafted the quarterback that they were in love with. They nurtured that quarterback. They built around that quarterback. They created something that was perfectly suited for that quarterback's talent, and they did that all with a purpose. And it took some patience, right? They weren't very good in 2018, but come 2019, they made the playoffs. Come 2020, they made the AFC Championship game, and now they're a contender. So that is the kind of build I want. I don't want to do what the Dolphins did, where they just sort of traded away all their team, and then they had a bad team, and then they drafted a quarterback, put him on a bad team, and now everything is crap there. They're like a 2-win team. I don't want to do that the way the Dolphins or the Browns did. I want to do it the way the Bills did. Maybe it means you have to suck for a while, but that is a cost, not a plan. So we'll talk a lot more about rebuilds in the future. If you have any questions about rebuilds, about the game, about whatever, send them to me at Luke Braun NFL at Locked On Vikings. We'll do Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. We'll do a mailbag. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Peacock and Williamson. They're covering everything from the NFL angle in a wacky, wacky week. A lot of weird upsets this week in the NFL. So go check out Peacock and Williamson for that. They are a daily podcast just like this one. Thank you so much. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.